gavel cracks like a gunshot, silencing the courtroom. But the man in the tailored suit doesn't flinch. His eyes lock onto the judge's sneer, a smirk dripping with decades of unchecked power. "Mr. Musk," the judge drawls, leaning forward, venom seeping into every syllable. "You may buy politicians, but you don't own this court." The air thickens, reporters lean in, cameras zoom. For a heartbeat, the billionaire's face is unreadable. Then, a flicker, not of anger, not of defeat, anticipation. Behind him a door creaks open. Footsteps echo. The judge's smile freezes. Because in that moment, he realizes his insult wasn't a victory. It was a detonator. And the timer? It had already hit 0. The truth, you see, isn't just about power. It's about patience. About letting tyrants hang themselves with the rope they've bragged about for years. This wasn't a trial. It was a trap. And the man in handcuffs? He never saw it coming. The courtroom had never felt smaller. Judge Elias Voss leaned back in his leather throne. A gift from the state, though he treated it like a birthright, and let his gaze crawl over Elon Musk like a spider assessing prey. The case was a farce. Everyone knew it. A 10-year-old environmental lawsuit, dredged up from the depths of a forgotten docket, alleging Musk's companies had violated obscure regulations in a remote Nevada county. No evidence, no witnesses, just a paper-thin excuse to drag a titan into his domain. Voss had chosen the suit personally, plucking it from the digital graveyard of dismissed claims like a curator selecting a weapon. He'd done this before, to oil heirs, to tech founders, to anyone who thought their money made them untouchable. "You seem confused, Mr. Musk," Voss purred, tapping a yellowed fingernail against the bench. The air smelled of old wood and older corruption. "This isn't one of your shareholder meetings. Here, I decide what's relevant." A few sycophantic chuckles rippled from the back, local lawyers who owed their careers to his favor. Musk's legal team shifted uncomfortably, their $2,000 suits suddenly feeling like straitjackets. They'd warned him, don't take the stand, don't engage. Voss eats pride for breakfast. But Musk had insisted. A fatal mistake, they thought. What they didn't understand, what Voss had fatally misjudged, was that this wasn't about winning, it was about recording. The judge's smirk widened as Musk stepped into the witness box, his every move tracked by iPhone cameras and live streams. This was Voss's masterpiece, humiliating the world's richest man on a global stage. He'd done it to others, of course. A pharmaceutical CEO he'd forced to read aloud her own leaked emails. A senator's son he'd sentenced to community service for a speeding ticket. But this would be his legacy. The day he made Elon Musk. "Neil, let's discuss your relationship with the law, Mr. Musk," Voss began, steepling his fingers. "You've built empires by bending rules, haven't you? Skirting labor laws, ignoring safety protocols, buying silence." The accusations hung like smoke, toxic and vague. Musk's lawyer objected, relevance, but Voss overruled with a wave. "Oh, I think the public deserves to know how men like you operate." Men like you. The phrase slithered through the room, weighted with decades of resentment. Voss had grown up in a trailer park, clawed his way through night school, buried a mother who died rationing insulin. He'd sworn he'd never kneel to the rich again. And he hadn't. He'd simply learned to make them kneel instead. For 20 brutal minutes, Voss needled, prodded, twisted. He asked about Musk's divorces, his tweets, his childhood in Pretoria. "Tell us," he sneered. "When did you first realize laws didn't apply to you? Was it before or after your 3rd billion?" The gallery stirred. Even the journalists looked uneasy. This wasn't jurisprudence. It was theatre, revenge, a bitter man weaponizing the one thing he'd ever owned, the gavel in his hand. Musk's answers were calm, factual, devoid of ego, dangerous. Because while Voss saw a billionaire squirming, the world saw something else. A man being stripped of dignity for sport. A worker watching their boss berated in a meeting. A tenant dragged before a slumlord judge. The injustice wasn't just Musk's. It was a mirror held up to every time the system broke someone just because it could. Then, the detonation. Enough, Voss barked, after Musk countered a question about Tesla's battery mines with actual data. You don't get to lecture me in my courtroom. Spittle dotted his microphone. You may buy politicians, but you don't own this court. The whole insult hung, jagged and raw. Musk's jaw tightened, not in anger, but focus, like a chess player hearing a clock tick. What Voss missed, in his triumph, were the clues, the unusual number of federal marshals lingering by the doors. The way Musk's lawyer kept glancing at her watch, not her notes, the faint buzz of silenced phones in reporters' pockets, but the people saw. Oh, they saw. Livestream comments exploded. This is illegal! Who does this guy think he is? If he can do this to Musk, what's he doing to regular folks? For the first time, Judge Voss began trending. Not for his cruelty, but for his stupidity. Because Elias Voss had just made a fatal error. He'd assumed the world still believed in kings. He didn't realize it now worshipped hackers. The silence that followed Judge Voss's insult was thicker than the humidity in a Louisiana August. Cameras zoomed in on Musk's face, hunting for a flinch, a twitch, anything to spin into a headline. But the billionaire just stared at the judge, his expression as unreadable as a blank check. Behind that gaze, though, calculations were firing, neural pathways forged in boardroom coups and midnight rocket launches. This wasn't his first witch hunt. He'd survived SEC investigations, shareholder revolts, the time he'd called a cave diver a pedo guy, and watched his own stock plummet. But this was different. Voss leaned back, savoring his victory lap. The fluorescent lights buzzed like flies over roadkill. No further questions, he said, smugness dripping from every syllable. Musk's lawyers shot him pleading looks. Don't react. Don't give him the soundbite. But their client was already rising from the witness stand. His polished Oxfords clicked against the linoleum, each step echoing like a countdown. Outside, a storm brewed. Dark clouds swallowed the Nevada sky, mirroring the tempest online. The live stream's viewership had tripled. Memes blossomed. Voss, photoshopped onto a Game of Thrones throne, Musk as a shackled Tony Stark. But between the jokes, fury simmered. If they can do this to him, what chance do we have? Tweeted a schoolteacher in Ohio. Judge Voss is every boss who ever stole. Your overtime, wrote a nurse in Florida. The world wasn't watching a trial anymore. They were watching their own nightmares play out, the faceless systems that could crush anyone, any time. In the courtroom bathroom, Musk splashed water on his face. The mirror showed a man pushed to the edge, tie slightly askew, a vein throbbing at his temple. For a split second, his mask slipped. He thought of his first company, Zip2, the nights sleeping under his desk while VCs laughed at his toys. He thought of SpaceX's early failures, the headlines calling him a lunatic. This was worse. Here, the rules weren't just rigged, they were fiction. Voss could have thrown the case out weeks ago. Instead, he turned it into a coliseum, and Musk was the lion stripped of claws. His phone buzzed. An encrypted message. All packages delivered, awaiting your signal. He stared at the screen, water dripping from his chin. This was the moment, the point of no return. Exposing Voss would require burning every bridge to the legal establishment, inviting scrutiny that could tank Tesla's stock, embolden regulators, unravel everything. He'd built empires by outthinking obstacles, but some walls were too high to scale, some enemies too entrenched. You're not a genius, you're a gambler, his ex-wife had once hissed during a custody battle. And one day, you'll bet wrong. The door creaked open. A federal marshal nodded at him, hand resting on her holster. Not a threat, a reminder. Hurry up, they were all pawns here, even the ones with badges. Musk straightened his tie, his reflection hardened. Gamblers knew when to go all in. Back in the courtroom, Voss was enjoying his encore. Given the witness's performance, he sneered, I'm inclined to revisit sentencing guidelines. Perhaps a personal lesson in accountability is warranted. The gallery murmured. This wasn't just unethical, it was unhinged. Even, the court stenographer paused, fingers hovering over her keyboard. Musk stood. Your Honor. The words cut through the room like a Tesla blade. Before you proceed, there's something you should see. Voss chuckled. Ah, the billionaire's last resort, a bribe. I assure you, Mr. Musk, my integrity isn't for sale. Not a bribe. Musk pulled a thumb drive from his pocket, sleek and silver. A confession. For the first time, the judge hesitated. His eyes darted to the bailiff, who shifted uncomfortably. This court doesn't entertain theatrics, Voss spat, but his voice wavered. No, Musk said, louder, now, but it does entertain evidence. Evidence of wire fraud, conspiracy, 12 years of verdicts bought and sold. He turned to the cameras, the thumb drive glinting like a blade, including the $2.5 million you took from ExxonMobil to sabotage my gigafactory permits last fall. The room exploded. Reporters lunged for their phones. Voss turned crimson, hammering his gavel. Order! Order! But the chaos was a living thing now, fed by decades of buried rot. Musk's lawyers shoved the drive into a laptop. The files splashed across every screen in the room. Spreadsheets, bank transfers, secret recordings of Voss snarling, I don't care if it's legal, just make it quiet. The marshal by the door unclipped her handcuffs. Voss stood, roaring. You think this changes anything? I own this county. Spittle flew. His robes billowed like a cape of lies. But Musk was already walking toward the exit, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The trap had sprung. Somewhere in the chaos, a single thought echoed. Not in Musk's mind, but in millions watching at home. Maybe the system isn't broken. Maybe it's just bendable. And sometimes, all it takes is one man with enough leverage to snap it backward. Chaos is a ladder, but only if you're the one who built it. The thumb drive's contents spread faster than a SpaceX launch. Within minutes, Voss corruption was trending globally, the hashtag burning through algorithms like acid, but inside the courtroom, time fractured. Judge Voss staggered back from the bench, his robes tangling around him like a shroud. This is fabricated, he barked, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. On the laptop screen, a video played, grainy security footage from a Michelin-starred steakhouse in Dallas. There was Voss, younger but unmistakable, accepting a briefcase from an ExxonMobil VP. For the Wyoming verdict, the VP said, grinning. Voss's reply, crisp and clear. Consider it buried. The marshal stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming. Your Honor! Don't you Your Honor me! Voss slammed his fist on the bench, sending papers flying. His veneer of control shattered, revealing the feral creature beneath, a cornered rat with a law degree. You think some billionaires? Deepfake nonsense overrules my authority. I'll have you disbarred. I'll have you all. A click echoed. The chamber door swung open, and a woman strode in, sharp-suited, ice-eyed, her federal badge hanging like a guillotine blade. Elias Voss, she announced. You're under arrest for racketeering, bribery and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The room inhaled. It wasn't the arrest that stunned them. It was the woman's identity. Sarah Nguyen, the DOJ's most feared prosecutor, the one who'd taken down 3 governors and a cartel. Musk stood motionless near the exit, a ghost in his own spectacle. This was the move Voss never anticipated. While the judge had been busy playing puppet master, Musk had been playing chess. 3 months earlier, a whistleblower from Voss's own courthouse, a clerk sick of shredding evidence, had slid into Musk's DMs. The billionaire hadn't hired a PR team. He'd hired forensic accountants, black hat hackers, Nguyen. Together, they'd traced the money. Shell companies in Belize, offshore accounts, A villa in Majorca bought with bribes disguised as consulting fees, but Musk had waited. Let Voss hang himself with hubris. Let the world watch. You can't do this, Voss yelped as Nguyen snapped cuffs around his wrists. The marshal stepped aside, suddenly very interested in his shoes. I have friends, powerful friends, Nguyen leaned in, her whisper carving through his panic like a scalpel. They've already flipped Elias, your clerk, your bookkeeper, even your wife. The colour drained from Voss's face. His wife, the socialite who'd funded his first campaign, who'd turned a blind eye to his affairs but not his accounting. She'd given them everything. Diaries, passwords, the key to a safety deposit box in Zurich. Across the room, Musk's phone lit up. A text from the whistleblower. Thank you. He deleted it. No. They'd thanked him. For the encrypted burner, phone, the relocation funds, the new identity. But this wasn't altruism. This was strategy. As Nguyen paraded Voss past the cameras, the judge now stammering, I demand immunity. I can name names. Musk slipped out a side exit. The storm had broken. Rain sheeted down, cleansing the desert air. Reporters mobbed, him shouting questions he'd never answer. Mr. Musk, how long have you known about Voss's crimes? Will you sue the state? What's next? He paused, rain dripping from his brow, and did something he'd never done publicly. He smiled, not the smirk of a victor, the quiet curve of a man who'd just proven a hypothesis. Transparency, he said, is the best disinfectant. Then he climbed into a Cybertruck idling at the curb, a vehicle whose production Voss had tried to block, and vanished into the storm. Inside the courthouse, workers scrubbed Voss's nameplate from his bench. A janitor paused, staring at the empty throne. Bastard had it coming, he muttered. On his phone, the livestream replay hit 10 million views. Comments scrolled. This is for every cop who planted evidence, for every boss who stole wages, for every teacher who bullied kids. The world wasn't cheering for Musk. They were screaming for themselves. Meanwhile, in a Manhattan penthouse, ExxonMobil's CEO watched the news, scotch sloshing in his glass. His assistant hovered, pale. Sir, the board's emergency meeting. They want your resignation. The CEO didn't respond. He was too busy staring at his own face on screen, the steakhouse video, looping endlessly, and realizing something horrifying. Musk hadn't just taken down Voss, he'd created a blueprint. The fall of a tyrant is never quiet. 3 weeks later, Elias Voss stood in a different courtroom, this time in a striped prison jumpsuit, shackles chafing his wrists. The same reporters who'd once trembled at his glare now snapped photos of his unshaven jaw, his yellowed teeth. The judge presiding. A Latina single mother turned jurist whose brother Voss had once sentenced to life for stealing diapers. She didn't smirk, didn't gloat, just stared at the evidence with the cold focus of a woman who'd waited decades for this scale to balance. Your Honor, I can explain, Voss croaked during sentencing, but the words dissolved into static. The microphone had been moved just out of reach. Poetic, the internet mused. Now he knows how it feels. He got 47 years, his wife divorced. Him sold the mansion and donated every tainted painting, every blood diamond ring to climate charities. A final middle finger. His son changed his last name, wrote a memoir titled The Bench. Even his mistresses turned on him, leaking texts that painted him as a pathetic miser who'd reused condoms. But the true justice wasn't in Voss's cell. It was in the wildfire he'd unwittingly ignited. Within hours of his arrest, a hacker collective dumped 87 gigabytes of court records online. Cases Voss had rigged, lives he'd destroyed. Overnight, exonerations rained down. A black teenager's drug charge magically erased. A widow's wrongful foreclosure overturned. A small-town mayor cleared of embezzlement, her sobbing press conference going viral. I prayed for this day. I just never thought someone would listen. That someone wasn't Musk. Oh, he'd sparked the flame, but the inferno belonged to the people. Protests erupted outside courthouses in all 50 states. Hashtags became legislation. The Voss Act sailed through Congress, mandating body cams on judges, lifetime bans on stock ownership for federal jurists, a public database of every legal bribe ever prosecuted. For once, bipartisanship didn't feel like a dirty word. Musk? He never said a word about it. Not on Twitter, not in earnings calls. When pressed at a Tesla event, he shrugged. Laws should work. Now, about that new battery. But in a rare unguarded moment, caught by a paparazzo's telephoto lens, he was seen reading a handwritten letter. The envelope bore the seal of the Nevada Innocence Project. The photo's caption broke the internet. He didn't do it for the credit. He did it because it was broken. As for ExxonMobil, their stock plunged 60% overnight. Climate activists bought up shares, just enough to crash the annual meeting. The CEO now spends his days testifying before Congress and his nights staring at subpoenas. His legacy? A business school case study titled How to Lose Everything in 10 Days. But the final twist? The sweetest one. In a dusty Nevada town near the Gigafactory, Voss tried to sabotage. A new courthouse rose, solar-paneled, air humming with geothermal cooling. Its inaugural judge? The whistleblower clerk, who'd risked it all. On her bench, a plaque reads, "Justice is the lie we make true." The day she swore her oath, someone sent a bouquet of Texas bluebonnets, Voss's favorite flower, back when he was human enough to love things. No card, just a letterhead. XA-A12. And as for us, the audience, the millions who watched a billionaire and a tyrant clash, we learned the oldest lesson, retold in Silicon and Handcuffs. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. Voss revealed rot. Musk revealed leverage. But the rest of us, we revealed something fiercer, a collective refusal to kneel. So the next time a boss threatens, a system intimidates, a judge mistakes their gavel for a godhammer, remember, the thumb drive is always watching and it's never full.